episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns.
What's up? Banker Bill, fully right. Dude, it has been quite some time since we've been on here. Bill, what's going on, bud?
What's up, man? It has been a while, hasn't it?
It has. And apparently, this is something I just discovered literally seconds ago as we were going live, that apparently you have to have some sort of premium subscription to go live on X now. So tonight, for the time being...
Thanks, Elon Musk.
We are live on both Facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns and the YouTube channel. And we'll see if we can get back on X next week. If we can't, maybe we'll go back to going back on Instagram. But as for the night goes, we're going to be live here on the two platforms. Bill, man, it's been a long time coming. Why don't you listen, I know we got a lot of football to get into, but why don't you get into a little bit about what you've had going on over the last few weeks over the summer since we've been absent from this here podcast?
I mean, I guess the reason I'm in what looks like prison, I think. If prison, I mean, I bought another house. And now I'm in a room that echoes. I put my desk in here today. I'm going to take it back out after we're done. Yeah, it looks like I'm in prison. I feel like I'm not allowed to decorate the walls. I should have like a bikini model poster with a hole in the wall, Shawshank Redemption style, behind me here, but I have nothing. So yeah, that's kind of what's happened. So I'm in a new house, I'm in a new podcast location, and hopefully everything goes well with the internet, because now I am no longer wired up, Ryan. I'm a Wi-Fi bandit. Let's call it that.
I mean, listen, in fairness, I am on Wi-Fi on this laptop too, I suppose. So, but yeah, Bill bought a new house, and your guy, Bully Rye, is, he's still chugging along, man. I'm still slinging nuts for my company. Listen, for the last...
Wait. That's just, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's how you should say that.
Oh, that's how I want to say it, because...
Okay.
For the last 3 months, I've been doing stand-up comedy. I talked about that before we went off the air for the summertime. And so I've been doing it a lot, going to a lot of open mics in the Greenville area. I entered in a couple of stand-up comedy competitions. Bill and his family came to it, and Bill said he was in tears with my set, that I won the crowd vote on that night. So I'll go ahead and pat myself on the back there.
We give each other the business, right? I mean, we're close friends, but we give each other the business whenever we can. I mean, we're competitive in whatever we do. So I'm not obviously going to be in stand-up comedy anytime soon. But with that being said, I do like stand-up comics, and your boy Bully Rye here is killing it. Like, it was, I mean, what did I see? What was the first time you got on stage? I was there for that. It was probably May.
Yeah.
Was it May?
It was in April.
April? Okay, so late April probably, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So...
Well, it was either April or May. It doesn't matter.
We'll call it 3.5 months later. I go to see you again. And I mean, stitches, man. I was laughing my butt. I was great. It was fantastic. I gave you credit. I gave you a compliment that night. We've talked since. It was fantastic. So if you get a chance to go see Ryan live, and I think you have a competition coming up on August 30th. I'm not going to be able to make that one for various reasons, but if you can go see him live, it's worth it. He's actually legitimately good. It's very cool.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I will plug the show, that comedy show, both at the end of this show and next week's show, because it is August 30th in Spartanburg, and there's, I believe, 12 other comedians that are going to be competing in this stand-up comedy competition out here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So there's a lot of people. I got some folks coming up from Charleston. If you are watching the show with us live tonight, a couple of viewers on Facebook. Again, I don't expect it to be a very, very high traffic show tonight because it's been so long since we have been on here. But please leave a comment, join the conversation, because we do have a lot to get to here in this return to the podcast world. Bill, we're going to start the show as we do now with my favorite segment, and that's called Homer's Corner. And my edition of Homer's Corner has to do with the fact that we talked about it prior to going off the air for the summertime, that EA Sports college football video game was coming back. It has come back. And I have been having a blast with it. Bill, I think, has a little bit of a different opinion than I do. There's a lot of negative.
Oh, easy now.
No, not from Bill perspective, but the internet community seems to have some mixed emotions. A lot of them calling it just another version of Madden, which I couldn't disagree with more. A lot of people say that there are like those, how do you call them, cheese plays or plays that where the computer defense is broken, so somebody's always open. That's kind of the case. I know they're making updates. They are going to be making roster updates during the season. They're going to be making software patches. They're going to be supposedly updating uniforms. As of right now, very few people can get on the Team Builder website if you want to create your own team to import into, I believe, Road to Glory or your offline dynasty, maybe. But a lot of fun features. Listen, we haven't had a college football video game for 10 years. This is about what I was expecting. And Bill, I'm having a blast. I've got an 80% winning percentage online against other players. I'm having a blast with it, Bill. I know you're still into NHL because your daughter likes to play hockey with you, and our friend Tony likes to play hockey. And so when I'm sitting here playing by myself on college football, y'all are over on hockey. But how do you feel about college football 25?
Well, so I have enjoyed playing hockey. You hooked me up with some guys and some guys to play with over on the hockey side, so I've been doing that. So not as much football as probably I would have expected when I knew that it was coming out. Is it a good game? Yes, I would recommend people buy it. Does it have its bugs just like every other EA game that's out there? Yes, it does. EA, they are not good programmers. They're just not. But this one's better. It has some good animations. It does some fun stuff. The game is fun. Is it frustrating at times? Yes. Every EA game is. I think every sports game. I don't know. I've played NBA 2K, obviously made by the 2K studios, and that can be frustrating as well. So it's not like it's just an EA thing. But is it fun? Is it good? Yeah, I think it's good. There's a lot of things they really kind of messed up on. I think they could have done better. I think some of the commentary is actually horrific. It's really, really bad, especially in the big games, like rivalry games and things. The commentary gets really flat and it's really bad. And I wonder how that even made the final copy of the game. You're like, how long did they have to do this? Like 13 minutes? So it's very strange. But would I recommend playing it? Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's like you said, we haven't had a college football game in 10 years, and it actually is really fun to be able to play with the real players, not just a roster import that somebody built, but what EA is handing you as the actual roster. The funny thing is, I thought about this last night, Ryan, because I was playing both leagues that you and I are in together, but playing the games. And we haven't even gotten excited about the actual players on the field yet, like in real life. And I think that the bug is going to, the itch is going to get worse when you start seeing the players, playing in real life. And we were complaining that one of our leagues is going really slow. And I think that we're going to if we get past the first season and you start to lose some players that are seniors this year and you don't actually get to play with them, when you've finally seen them on the field, you're going to want to go back and play offline or something like that to actually play with those guys that are playing. And then, you said, roster updates are going to change the ratings. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think they released it so early that we haven't even gotten to the point where we're like, oh, I just watched that really cool play. I want to go play with that guy. That's going to happen. Good game.
Yeah, I will say that there are some, like you said, there are some bugs in the game. I can only speak from a perspective as a Carolina fan that there are some visual bugs too. Like for South Carolina, they wave white flags during Sandstorm, and the band is wearing black uniforms. In real life, they have white flags and the white band uniforms. Not to mention, I guess they didn't want to pay to get 2001: A Space Odyssey in the game because South Carolina comes out to Sandstorm, and that's not what happens.
At least you got Sandstorm though. At least you got that. I mean, there's
Sandstorm's
Virginia
there.
Tech. Virginia Tech didn't get enter Sandman.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah. So there are some things
I will say too, this college football video games have been coming out for 20 years with that 10-year exception. And this is the first game that the actual South Carolina fight song is in the game. Because it came from an old musical.
Blows my mind.
Yep, it was from an old musical, and I guess EA didn't want to pay for the rights to it. But for the first time ever, because I remember back on NCAA 14, if you had an Xbox, I don't know if it worked with a PlayStation, but you could import your own music to play. And so I had a CD that I had burned with all the actual music that they played in games, and I would have to upload those files into the game, set them up for the right timing, and that's the only way that I got South Carolina's fight song into the game, was when I had to do it myself. Now that's been taken care of. So hopefully next year, because there's also not coaches in the game. The head coaches, offensive, defensive coordinators are generically imported into the game. So
I don't want to spend too much time. But the fact that you just said, I mean, this is like epic nerdiness right here, or like marked 100%. Out for Gamecock football. I had a CD burned with all of the in-game. I mean, come on, Ryan.
Dude, my dad had a cassette tape that was amazing. Like the sounds of the Southeast, like cassette tape with all the different band music we would listen to on the way to games when I was a kid.
Blows my mind though. It's the first time you get a fight song. Actually, I'm gonna start paying attention to that when I see the Gamecocks playing this, to see if I can listen to it, because I didn't realize that I mean, that's got to be, you get kind of giddy over stuff like that. I mean, it's what it is. That's what we like about college football.
Yeah, it was an old like band version of 2001 that used to play in the old games. But I digress. All right, let's move on here, because we do have a lot to get to.
Oh yeah.
Bill's Homer's Corner has to do with Tua Tagovailoa and what he had to say about Brian Flores earlier this week. And I love that you picked this, because this was an interesting situation. So Bill, take it away.
Well, I mean, if you've been living under a rock and you're not an NFL fan, if you're coming here, I imagine you're an NFL fan. So you've seen what was said. Tua Tagovailoa on the Dan Le Batard show called, basically went through and I don't want to say he said Brian Flores is a terrible person, but he was talking about his relationship with Brian Flores and what it was like playing under Brian Flores as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins years ago. It was about 3 years ago now. And when he was drafted in the NFL by the Miami Dolphins, by Brian Flores and his administration and his regime, apparently Brian Flores was telling him every single day how he's terrible. Not terrible. He didn't use the word terrible. He just said that he sucked. He told him that he sucked. He didn't deserve to be there. He hadn't earned it. Someone else should have been there, not him. Lots of just really, really terrible things, especially for your guy that you're hoping is going to become your starting quarterback. If you remember what went on, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the starting quarterback. They didn't want to start Tua. He would bench Tua anytime he made a mistake. He'd make mistakes. He wouldn't get things going. He'd bench him. Obviously, just completely shaking this guy's confidence coming straight out of college, especially coming off of the really, really bad hip injury that Tua had. I just can't imagine what this poor guy went through. So anyway, so he gets on the Dan Le Batard show. He lays it all out, finally speaks about the entire situation. And in the middle of it, he said, it was a bad thing having this terrible person talk about you. And I'm not quoting exactly, but it's a paraphrase of what he was actually saying. But he did say terrible person and tell you that you're a terrible football player, basically.
Shannon said it best too. It cooked him. He did. Let him have it.
Well, here's the thing. So, and I've been watching videos and different reactions, and Stephen A. Smith said something about it today where he did not see, and I this is what I thought too, because I went and looked at Brian Flores. Brian Flores reacted to it, and Stephen A. Smith picked up on what I did, and he said he did not deny anything that Tua said. I'm sorry. Dude deserves it. Like, this is a head coach. Come on, man. Like, I get it. That's tough coaching. Tom Brady has talked about, tough coaching. You got to take it. But this guy's coming out of college. You're hoping that you're excited. He comes to, the Miami Dolphins. It's his first experience in the NFL. And all he gets told is that he wasn't wanted. That's basically what it was. Brian Flores was letting him know that he wanted somebody else and he didn't like that he was on his team. That's awful. Just awful. And so, yeah, Shannon, he got cooked and he deserved it. That's my opinion. And Flores not denying it and just saying, hey, I had to learn from how I treated him, and I wish him success. Good. Take the high road, but you deserve everything you're going to get from this.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't it they wanted to trade Tua to go get Deshaun Watson. Like when Watson was coming.
Yeah, there was. Yes, Houston, that was year two. And
so like, that's why he was doing
supposedly what blocked that was the owner. Stephen Ross was the one that didn't want to trade for Deshaun Watson. And the rumor was, and apparently it was probably true now that we know what we know, is that Flores wanted Deshaun Watson and wanted to trade Tua for Deshaun Watson, and Ross blocked it, waited till the end of the season, and then fired Flores after Miami's first back-to-back winning seasons in 18 years. And everybody was like, what the heck just happened? And yeah.
You talk about a guy that didn't deserve it. I'm not sure if Deshaun Watson keeps the quarterback job in Cleveland over Jameis Winston at this point. Like what a joke that turned out to be.
Yeah.
With that take that that Watson would have been a better take over Tua Tagovailoa. Your sister's in the chat welcomes us back. Thank you for joining us tonight, Tara. Glad that you can be here. I hope y'all enjoyed Homer's Corner because we got some other football to get into. Before we really get into some college and NFL talk, I did want to briefly touch on the UFL because we did not come back on the air to recap the UFL Championship.
Briefly.
But if you watch we talked about the UFL the entire season. The championship game was a giant letdown, a giant goose egg for the San Antonio Brahmas as they followed the Birmingham Stallions 25-0. I had a lot of people say that they tuned into this game to see if it was going to be enjoyable, and they based the entire UFL season off of the championship game. And quite frankly, it was the worst game of the season. Bill, what do you have to say about Birmingham, San Antonio?
You said it. It was terrible. In fact, we talked about whether or not we should get back on here and discuss that game. And it was so bad that both of us were like, yeah, no, there's nothing to be said. Like, what are you going to see? We're going to get on there and go, well, San Antonio didn't show up.
Yep.
That's it. And Birmingham, smoked them. So it was not good. It's not
Birmingham
good. I'm looking forward to future UFL seasons, though. I am.
And Birmingham wins their third straight league championship after back-to-back USFL championships. And now they come in and win the UFL in its inaugural season. There will be a UFL season 2. They're already talking about, network deals and trying to find ways to get fans in the stands. If you remember, the UFL or the XFL and the USFL merged in January, and we're still able to put on a full season when the spring rolled around. So with some more planning, we might be able to get some more activity here. There is a story that the U.S. military, I believe the U.S. Army, is suing Dwayne Johnson and the ownership group of the UFL. I'm not sure if you heard this, Bill.
Yeah, I did.
Because they didn't hold their end of the bargain to promote the Army during the games, which couldn't have been farther from the truth. If you ever watched the UFL game this year, every single week they interviewed an Army veteran or an active duty Army, Ranger, Army, whatever you want to call it, and promoted the Army in every single game. So I don't know what I guess the U.S. Army just saw that. Well, I think they said something along the lines of they got 0 new enlistings from the promotion they did with the UFL.
Like, nobody said they saw the UFL and decided to come fight in wars. Like,
yeah.
It also boiled down to something about The Rock didn't do enough personal promotion, like through his social medias or something like that. They asked him to do 6 and he only did 2.
Well, The Rock kind of got busy when he got put on the board of WWE in the with the TKO merger,
where the real money's made.
Yep, because he's God. And then we're going to talk some wrestling sometime soon on this show. PJ Steven and Michael Davis are going to come and talk some wrestling.
Not this show.
Not this show, but on Tap Outs and Touchdowns. Let's get one more thing out of the way with the UFL. There are some players that signed with NFL teams. Volley Polly, a friend of the show, former guest of the show. I still owe him a T-shirt, so shame on me. He wanted to know who we thought was going to have the biggest impact early on in the 2024 NFL season. Some guys that are currently in the league right now. Hakeem Butler with the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, A.J. McCarron. I don't think he's signed with anybody in the NFL yet, but there are some guys. Listen, Bill, there's only one name that sticks out to me. And I think you know who it is.
Me too. Yeah, you're wearing the jersey.
Yeah. It's Jake Bates, the kicker for the Detroit Lions, formerly of the Michigan Panthers. All he did was bomb 60-yarders throughout the season in the UFL. And he kicked a field goal to beat Kansas City in preseason week 2, a game that we saw Kansas City play their starters for an entire quarter when the Lions played their backups the entire game. So I think, Bill, anything else you want to add to that? Because I think we both agree that Jake Bates will be the starting kicker, will be the kicker for the Detroit Lions, and he will have an impact for that team the entire season.
In preparation for the show, I went through every high-profile player that got signed, including Breland Speaks, who led the league in the UFL in sacks this year with 9.5 in 10 games. He's on the Jaguars depth chart, but he's buried. So I don't know if he's going to even make a difference. So when you go down the list, there's a few names that stick out a little bit that we, like Dawood Davis that played pretty well with, I believe it was Memphis. Hakeem Butler, obviously, we've been watching him do really well in the XFL and the UFL for 2 seasons, but can't stick in the NFL. And none of the quarterbacks, Luis Perez is actually on the Chargers roster. They're saying there's a possibility he could be the backup week 1, which would be really cool, as we've seen him win the XFL championship. But when it comes down to actually
cut Max Duggan today.
Right, exactly, yeah. So he's beat him out, which is a big deal because Duggan was a Heisman finalist. So when he was at TCU. So I think when you actually talk about making an impact, if you don't mean an impact on like making an indention on the bench, then I think the only player that we're really going to see play is Jake Bates.
I agree. Listen, real quick before I know I'm kind of going out of order here, and we're not doing fantasy football talk until next week. But we mentioned Hakeem Butler. I actually had this conversation with somebody earlier this week when the name Kyle Pitts got brought up, because I think that Kyle Pitts will be one of the biggest busts in draft history. He was expected to be this superstar coming out of Florida, this next hybrid type tight end, the next Tony Gonzalez, the next Gronk, whatever the case is. I would compare Kyle Pitts to Hakeem Butler. I feel like they're both big-bodied. Kyle Pitts plays tight end, but he's more of a big-bodied wide receiver. I think Kyle Pitts could go into the UFL and win a league MVP. I don't think he's ever going to be that good in the NFL. Bill is a former Florida Gator. What say you? Because again, we're gonna break down some fantasy football talk and draft strategy and stuff next week. But what would you say about my comparison between Kyle Pitts and Hakeem Butler?
Well, okay. Kyle Pitts has not had a quarterback to throw to him yet in his career. I mean, Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder. Come on. Now he does. So let's watch and see what Kyle Pitts does this season when there really aren't a ton of options. I mean, Drake London, I don't even know who the other wide receiver is. I think I even looked him up because I think Atlanta might be a pretty decent team this year. I like Kirk Cousins. So they might be an okay team with Kirk Cousins as a quarterback. He's not terrible. He wasn't terrible at Washington, and he was pretty darn good in Minnesota. So let's see what he does. But if Kyle Pitts can't do it with Kirk Cousins, he can't do it. This is kind of make or break here.
I'm so mad. I've got a depth chart cheat sheet across the room that I'm not going to get up and go get. So, but yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, it's ESPN puts a cheat sheet out that gives you now draft or depth charts for every single team as far as like high profile positions and stuff go now. So we'll talk about fantasy football next week. But I did want to ask that question while Hakeem Butler and Kyle Pitts were on the mind because I compare them to be like the kind of the same type of player.
Darnell Mooney. That's the other wide receiver.
From Chicago.
Ray McLeod is the slot. Ourlads.com, a little bit of a promotion for them. They're awesome.
Pop quiz. Where did Ray McLeod go to college?
If it's not South Carolina, it's not anything else.
It's Clemson. He went to Clemson.
Oh, why would I know that?
I don't know. I just wanted to throw you a curveball. Anyway, all right.
Okay.
Speaking of college ball, let's get to talking some college football here. Throughout this summer, we've been hearing a lot about the ACC and their lawsuits that are being put up against them by both Florida State and Clemson. Obviously, trying to get we've touched on this briefly in the show in the past. Basically, this is their last ditch effort to escape the ACC without having to extend all the way until 2036. I think is when the contract is. There's been mediation between the ACC and Florida State. Decisions were made that North Carolina originally a countersuit was filed by the ACC that was basically stating that they could only sue the conference in the state of North Carolina. A judge in South Carolina basically walked that back and said, no, Clemson has the right to sue the ACC in the state of South Carolina. So we're going to see a lot of appeals and a lot of back and forths here. I'm not sure what question I want to pose to you, Bill, but obviously this court case is going to go on for a while. Based on what we've seen, based on what we know, based on why the lawsuits have been filed regarding the argument that the former commissioner did not negotiate the TV deal in good faith for the league members. Bill, what are your thoughts about these lawsuits? And do you think that this is going to eventually see both Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC earlier than they should? And what would that mean for the future of the conference as a whole?
I mean, this is what we put our Swami hats on, our predictive hats. No, I don't think they're going to get away with this. I don't. I don't think that there is. I don't think their argument holds water. I think they're just trying to find a way out so they can go somewhere else and try to get more money. They signed unanimously 2 agreements. I think it was in 2010 and 2016 when they were negotiating the TV deal to agree to all the bylaws and everything else that the ACC was doing. And now they're just grasping at straws. And it has to do with one company. Like I think his name was Mooney, that was the ACC commissioner at the time. I think that might be his last name. He was negotiating to have like Raycom be part of the ACC TV deal, and he said that was mandatory. I don't know if he was getting kickbacks there.
It was because his son worked for Raycom.
Raycom, okay, so that it was Raycom.
Yeah, it was
okay,
Raycom or Jefferson.
I'm remembering.
What used to be Jefferson Pilot, whatever it was.
Right. So he was insisting that was part of the TV deal, and that's what they're standing at. Come on, stop it. That's ridiculous.
I feel like that's the one hole that they have to plug in the ACC.
That's what they're trying to do.
And I think if a judge finds it, I think this could go as high as the federal court system, because the government's been wanting to get involved in college athletics.
Wasting our money, Ryan. They're wasting our money.
They've wasted our money on worse things, Bill. Let's be honest. But yeah, listen, I think it does open the door for them to get out the ACC. I think that Florida State and ACC were sort of forced to have mitigation before it goes to trial to try to find some common ground. You got to think about it this way. In one aspect, let's say they don't get out of the conference, but let's say with the mediation that they've done, now Florida State negotiates a bigger piece of the pie from a financial standpoint, because the argument that Clemson and Florida State are basically presenting is the fact that we are carrying the conference. Without Florida State and Clemson, the conference has no value. Whether that's right or wrong, is in the world of college football, they sort of have a leg to stand on. When it comes to basketball, you've got Duke, UNC, Wake Forest, Clemson for that matter. There's plenty of basketball schools. Let's stick with football here. I think that if in mediation, they're able to come to an agreement that, let's just say Florida State and Clemson are able to get a bigger piece of the ACC financial pie, all of a sudden the other schools are going to come up arguing against that. Like, Florida State's not taking my money. So now you're going to see other schools start suing the ACC because this isn't what we agreed to. If y'all are adjusting this, then y'all need to adjust ours. And I think it's just going to be this trickle-down effect. Worst case scenario, if what you said happens and they're stuck in this conference for another 12 years, the ACC come 2036 will implode. I mean, they're already going to have a plans in 2034. We will hear about Florida State and Clemson joining the Big 12. We will hear North Carolina and Duke, maybe Virginia Tech and Virginia joining the SEC. We will hear about Miami and Louisville and Georgia Tech joining a Big 12, or maybe like an ACC or an AAC is able to build off of some of these conferences. But I think at the end of the day, regardless of what happens in the immediate future with these lawsuits, the ACC will cease to exist the same way that the Pac-12 essentially ceases to exist in 12 years' time. Bill, let's move on here from the ACC story. Let's talk about Michigan. We sort of talked about it when Jim Harbaugh, or was it John Harbaugh? I always get the names mixed up. When the Harbaugh brothers,
this one's Jim.
Jim. When Jim Harbaugh left Michigan, we all kind of knew what was coming. And when the word got out and the NCAA hit their sanctions, Harbaugh continued to be defiant and saying, "I'm not apologizing for nothing. I didn't do anything wrong," and basically threw everybody else at the school under the bus. But he was going to come out and be their like honorary captain or whatever the case is for their home opener. And then that came out. He's like, I need to focus on Chargers football. Michigan's been put on probation. And this has nothing to do with the sign stealing scandal with Connor Stallions last year. And it has to do with the fact that they were illegally recruiting during COVID and having impermissible communication with recruits during what was supposed to be a dead period. Bill, I guess, what are your thoughts on this situation? Will Michigan see some heavy penalties because now they're on probation and now they're going to get hit with another sanction when it comes to the sign stealing deal? Their new coach that took over for Harbaugh has been implicated in that. Do we expect to see him suspended? Harbaugh's on a show cause for the NCAA. He can't coach college football for another 4 years. Not that he's going to come back. But what do you see coming out of this Michigan story?
I mean, we're going to see something. They have to. I mean, at this point, it was sort of a slap on the wrist a little bit before. Yeah, probation, a couple little penalties here and there. This one's gonna it's gonna have to be worse. You got a repeat offender here that's repeating in the same year. They've gotten busted for 2 things in the same year. So and they're your defending national champion. So that makes it really, really awkward. So yeah, I think nice, Shannon. Go ahead. You should post that one, Ryan. That's good.
Let's see it.
Yeah.
We both better hope Connors keeps his mouth shut. I agree. By the way, my mom came in the chat and said, "Hey," earlier. Sorry, what's up, Mom? But yeah, to Shannon's point,
I think I don't want to speculate on what penalties they actually receive. There's no precedent to this where you just have a team that continues. I mean, what SMU way back in the day? I mean, they got smoked with penalty, destroyed that team for 20 years. But yeah, I think you're going to see. I think they're going to be a little bit lenient because this is a marquee team. I hate to say that. If it was anybody that was smaller, like if UCF got busted for this kind of stuff, they would like destroy them.
Oh yeah,
you no longer
Miami
have
a couple years ago.
But because it's Michigan,
Miami had strippers on a boat that recruits were getting to hang out with, and Miami got a slap on the wrist. To your point, Michigan's a high-profile team. Yeah. They're never going to drop the hammer on Michigan, especially.
But they've got to do something. I mean, we're talking scholarships. I mean, they got to do something. It's getting egregious. Like, how much stuff are we going to let Michigan get away with? And I mean, do you think it helped them win the national title? Probably not. The sign stealing, maybe, but they were clearly a good team.
So my problem, and I don't want to spend too much time on that because we got to get some NFL stuff, but
yeah,
my problem with that is you mentioned scholarships. Starting next year, college athletes will be considered employees of the university. So scholarships aren't going to mean anything. So does that mean that we're going to lower the salary cap at Michigan for the next few years? Because they're being punished for this? Like, I'm curious to see what salaries they're going to allow for college athletes, because you're still going to be able to do NIL.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that you're going to have salary caps across the board for these universities where they can have the equal playing field. Yeah, it's a weird look. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think they ought to drop the hammer, but I don't think they're going to do it.
Right.
Next up in college football, they have released the preseason top 25. Very few surprises. Georgia atop of the top 25, 46 first place votes. Ohio State at 2, Oregon 3, and Texas and Alabama round out the top 5 now. In all SEC, 3 of the top 5 teams are SEC programs. Bill, I don't want to go through the whole top 25. You can look it up. Were there any teams in the top 25 that surprised you, whether they were too high, too low? Any teams that you thought deserved to be in the top 25 that didn't make the preseason top 25? I know we talk about this every year. They shouldn't release college football rankings until like week 6, but here we are, so that you and I have something to talk about.
I think the one that the one that I saw that I was the most surprised with was Washington. Washington makes the final last year, and they didn't make the top 25. Did they fall that fast, that quickly? I think that one surprised me. I know that they obviously a different conference now. We have to see them play in a different conference. Michael Penix obviously now playing for the Atlanta Falcons. That's going to be something that hurts them. But again, you don't usually see a team that was that good to make the final, and now they're not even ranked. Like that surprised me. I think it's really the only one. It, like you said, they're all boring. I don't care. Well, our teams are 38th and 39th, Ryan.
Oh, are they? That's pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
They're both.
I mean, listen,
we got 11 points in the AP. You got 10.
Well, to your point about Washington, they also have a different coaching staff. Their head coach is now at Alabama. So it's probably where they fell off so heavy, is that they lost their offense, they lost their head coach, and so nobody knows what to expect out of them.
Right.
I'm genuinely surprised that Florida State is so high. They are number 10 in the country, considering that Jordan Travis got hurt. We all know what happened last year about them whining and complaining about missing the playoff, and then half the team quit to go in the transfer portal or to go to the NFL. And there's still players on social media talking about like getting revenge on college football 25 by going up on beating Georgia because they knew they could have beaten them. If you knew you could have beaten them, why did you leave? Play them in the bowl game, but instead you walked around like the wusses you are, and now they sit at the top 10. I don't buy into that.
You know what I think? We've been crapping all over Florida State. I think we should just revoke their charter, and they no longer can be a university. Florida has better teams anyway, so like let's just get rid of Florida State and just we're done with them. Like let's be done.
It's funny that
you're
a Florida fan saying that. But yeah, listen, I'm with you.
You know what? Let's just do it for Florida State and Clemson. Like, if they want to bother with the ACC, they can go play in their own league. They can just play every single weekend. See, now you're on board. Now, if I get rid of Clemson too, you're like, yes, this is a great idea.
Listen, you mentioned Clemson. They're 14th in the country. Of course, the I don't know how to describe them on it. That's going to be appropriate for the show. Dabo Swinney saying that they're going to be back in championship form. They're going to have a good defense. They did hold South Carolina to one offensive touchdown in last year's season finale for the Gamecocks, but they didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game. You've got some wide receivers that you don't know about. Clemson used to be considered wide receiver U with the likes of DeAndre Hopkins and Sammy Watkins and what can I say? It wasn't Kelly
T.
Bryant.
Higgins,
quarterback.
T.
Higgins.
Yeah.
So they used to be considered wide receiver U, and they haven't really had that wide receiver step up. You've had some running back questions the last couple of years. And Cade Klubnik, we still don't know what to expect out of him. You know, the problem with Clemson is that since they had that run with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence that both won national championships, they haven't found their quarterback. I said this years ago, when Brent Venables leaves Clemson, that will be the start of the decline for the Clemson Tigers and their relevancy. Because if you remember, years ago, I think it was 2010 or 2011, one of those years, Clemson won the ACC championship after losing to South Carolina in the season finale, won the ACC championship, and played West Virginia from the Big East in the Orange Bowl. And there was a running joke from South Carolina fans that, hey guys, West Virginia just scored again. That year, they were able to hire Brent Venables to be the defensive coordinator, and only then was Clemson able to get over that hump. Venables is gone. Everybody's talking about the great athletes they have on that defense. How much depth is there? Because Dabo refuses to go into the transfer portal. We've talked about that numerous times. They want the people they recruit, so they recruit them. Some of them leave, and they don't replace those people. So I'm taking off my homer hat here and trying to be objective with it until we see Clemson with a quarterback the likes of Taj Boyd, of Deshaun Watson, of Trevor Lawrence. We haven't seen it. DJ Uiagalelei is going to be playing in his third school, and we get to see how he does against his former team this year now that he's playing at Florida State. We still don't know what we're going to get out of Cade Klubnik. Until they can find a quarterback that can supplement their run game and alleviate some of the pressure off their defense, I think 14 is too high for Clemson. We'll talk about some sort of predictions about college football next week. I've talked to a couple of people that in the process of my work, and I think Clemson could very easily be at 8-14 this year. I'd have to look at the schedule to be able to point them out. But it could very easily be one of those like, okay, now we're back in Tommy Bowden era where like you've got all the talent, but why can't you win games? And I think eventually Dabo's going to get tired of the pressure and he's going to go pro. So we'll see what happens there. Last thing we'll talk about college football. Week 0, we have real college football this weekend in Ireland. Pat McAfee will be there at game day. Sheamus will be the guest picker from WWE on College Game Day this weekend. Pat McAfee will be gone from WWE for quite some time to do College Game Day every week. But the number 10 Florida State Seminoles and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are both on the road in Ireland to play a neutral site game, a neutral site conference game, which is crazy to think about. the line moved when I first put all this stuff in yesterday. Florida State was an 11.5-point favorite. Now they are a 10.5-point favorite. Bill, I don't think Georgia Tech gets the win, but I think they could probably keep it within 10.5 in this game. What do you say?
I don't know. We haven't seen either one of those teams. I don't know. What's Florida State going to look like? We don't. Before Jordan Travis, Florida State was meh. They were okay. Jordan Travis was a good player. They made him a whole lot better, and they went undefeated until the bowl game last year. But I don't know. What is Georgia Tech going to look? I have no idea. Do I think they keep it close? Yeah, they probably keep it close. It's a weird game. They're in Ireland. All the kids are going to feel weird about it. It's going to be strange. I don't know why they're playing this game in Ireland. It's just so strange. Like last year, it was they had I think Notre Dame played this game, so it was the Fighting Irish playing in Ireland. That made sense. Oh, hey, Notre Dame, they're the Fighting Irish. And it's a Georgia Tech and Florida State. Like, who cares? Why would you play that in Ireland? But I guess they have some cool, real cool deal with the stadium. I have no idea, but we'll see.
Imagine if college football expanded to European colleges.
Look, are there like Oxford plays? Like that would be.
Yeah, imagine if European colleges got into American football.
Yeah,
and now they expanded like the NFL does, and they want to expand into Europe.
It's a heck of a trip.
I'm excited to see what DJ Uiagalelei can do back in the ACC. I think that
I'm not.
I think that Dabo was ready to move on from DJU. I still didn't think he was that good. I didn't think he was that good in Oregon State last year. But I'm curious to see what it can do back inside the ACC. Bill, you've got a shout out from Keith Paul. Hey,
what's up, Keith?
In here watching the show with us tonight. And again, if you're watching the show, a couple YouTubers, a few people on Facebook, leave a comment, join the conversation, let us know what you're thinking about what we're talking about. Next week we'll have week 1 talk, so we'll bring back podcast pick'ems next week, and we'll talk some more college football. Maybe break down a little bit of the Florida State Georgia Tech game if it was a fun game to watch. But we've probably got some better week 1 matchups that we want to talk about. So college football right around the corner. Play the video game if you're waiting for it and can't wait that long. But next week we'll have a lot more college football to talk about. Bill, let's move over to the NFL, and let's start with the story out of Minnesota as J.J. McCarthy tears his meniscus. And I've torn my meniscus, and I was back at work a week later, but apparently he needed a complete meniscus repair and will miss the entire 2024-25 season. Sam Darnold is now your starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. I started doing my record breakdown earlier tonight, and I already have Minnesota with 4 losses, and that's before I even get to looking at their schedule from a Minnesota standpoint. Bill, what are your thoughts? JJ apparently looked good in the in fall camp prior to this injury. What are your thoughts on JJ McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings now having to rely on Sam Darnold at quarterback?
JJ McCarthy that's sad. Obviously, you don't want to see a player get injured, especially a rookie where he's trying to find his way in the NFL. And like you said, apparently looked good. I don't have high expectations for JJ McCarthy in the NFL. I didn't think that I thought he was overdrafted, but looked good. And now he's not playing this season, and goodbye season for the Minnesota Vikings. It's a disaster. So you're going to have it's going to be neat because they're not going to win any games. Sam Darnold, obviously not a good quarterback. And they're going to have a high draft pick again. So they get a really cool player that apparently won't need to be a quarterback if they still like JJ McCarthy going into next season. And then there's no reason not to, because you're not going to get any kind of games from him, right? So that's terrible for Minnesota. We have a friend that gets, comes on the show, Sean McElveen, that he's a Minnesota Vikings fan. I feel very bad for him now. They're bad day.
Well, you want to talk about UFL players in the NFL? The Vikings signed former Panthers draft pick and former UFL quarterback Matt Corral.
I did see
backup.
That. Yeah.
The backup for your Birmingham. Was it Birmingham Stallions backup?
Yes.
So he was a UFL
was the backup
champion
and part-time starter, beat out by Adrian Martinez, but yeah.
So he'll get a shot to play back. Listen,
you don't play backup, Brian. You just hang out. You and I can play backup, right? We're doing it right now.
Yeah. Listen, I think he could eventually win out that job from Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is that bad. I think the Vikings are that bad.
It's bad.
It's bad. Even before JJ McCarthy, I mean, on that Vikings offense, you now had Aaron Jones, who's coming over from Green Bay. The Vikings struggled to run the ball last season after letting go of Dalvin Cook. Jarek? That wasn't Jerick McKinnon. That was a long time ago. I can't even remember who the running back was for Minnesota last year because they expected him. Was it Alexander Madison?
Yes.
That they expected to be the next Dalvin Cook, because every time Dalvin Cook got hurt, Madison stepped in and played well. Minnesota didn't have a run game last year.
No.
JJ, why can't I say his name? Justin Jefferson. That's where JJ comes from.
That hurt
Justin
his fantasy prospects, didn't it? Now you're like, oh, do I even want to draft him in the first round? No.
There's people that are still doing it.
Oof.
And not to mention the fact that Jefferson was hurt for some last year. TJ Hawkinson's going to miss the first few games of the season coming off of his torn ACL. I mean, I think you talked about getting an early pick. There's a couple of teams that drafted early last year that I think are going to be drafting early again this year. Because I think the good teams, despite drafting late, drafted well enough and were active enough in free agency that the rich have gotten richer and the poors, like the Minnesota Vikings, continue to get worse. So sorry, Sean. I didn't like Bill said, I didn't have high expectations for JJ McCarthy, but I did have higher expectations for JJ McCarthy than I did for any other quarterback on that roster. So the Vikings are in for another very long season. Let's talk real quick about Brandon Ayuk, Bill. What a blank show that has been in San Francisco. Apparently, if you've been living under a rock, Brandon Ayuk demanded the trade because he wouldn't get a contract extension of his liking. And so the Niners went out and got a couple of trade partners that offered him decent money. And he's turned them all down. Deebo Samuel has come out and basically said Brandon Ayuk will be a 49er this year and every year going forward. So it appears as though all of this has been nothing but a ploy to get a new paycheck. We talked about it earlier this year. I think it was Fantasy Football Pros or whatever it was, the site that I've discredited based on their rankings. They had Brandon Ayuk above Deebo Samuel in their quarterback rankings postseason. I don't think he's the number one wide receiver on that team. And the fact that he wants to get paid like a number one anywhere in the NFL is crazy to me. But at the end of the day, I'm not really sure if I have any faith in Brandon Ayuk at all. Like from a production standpoint, he's been nothing but a distraction. What do you think? What do you make of this story, and how do you think it affects the 49ers going into the season as your defending NFC champions?
It's really interesting. So there's three of them that are really happening all at one time. Jamar Chase is locked in the same situation as Brandon Ayuk, and we've got CeeDee Lamb holding out down in Dallas. So I'm tired
T. Higgins. You mentioned T. Higgins earlier. T. Higgins, he isn't holding out, but T. Higgins wants out of Cincinnati because he wants a new contract.
So they have issues with both their wide receivers, but I'm just tired of wide receivers. I'm getting tired of wide receivers. I'm Tyreek's wearing me out. I'm just kidding. I love Tyreek. I want more Jalen Waddles who just don't talk. Just take money. I mean, he got an extension this year. It wasn't a super huge extension. Probably deserves it. And also said that he was I found this out, and we're not talking about Jalen Waddle, but I want to point it out, the difference between certain receivers and a guy like Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle, actually, they in Miami were trying to get Tyreek 2,000 yards last year, and they told Jalen Waddle, hey, that, will probably hurt your production. And he said, I'm just here to support. Jalen Waddle said that. That's good. And they rewarded him with a big contract regardless. And he still went over 1,000 yards, but they still rewarded him with a big contract. I just get tired of these wide receivers, man. I get it. Like, wide receivers it's a big deal. They help your quarterback out a tremendous amount. And Ayuk is a fantastic wide receiver. He was listed in the top 10 of wide receivers this year, actually over Deebo, which I think you and I both disagreed with. All around player Deebo, I think I'd rather have him. But I mean, just play the game. You're they're under contract. It's not that they aren't being paid. It's they want more money than the money they originally agreed to. And I get it. It's this rookie deal thing where you're trying to, get the money before you get hurt or something like that. And I get it. But yeah, it just frustrates me, man. I just hate seeing this. I read an article that it sounds like they've all kind of got a deadline in their head, and they're trying to wait to see who folds first, the team or the player, because at whatever point, if if players miss practices, the teams are allowed to fine them $50,000 per practice. Right now, they're not fining Ayuk for this. They haven't fined him yet, but they can. So they're trying to be nice, and they did up their offer, but it's still not enough for him. So, whatever. As long as it doesn't say Dolphins on it, I hope all these teams have dysfunction.
I would have to do some hardcore research. I don't think in the history of the NFL, at least over the last 20 years since all this stuff started becoming more prevalent, I don't think there's ever been a player that didn't have a contract dispute or have a holdout issue prior to the start of the season that had a killer season that year.
No,
I mean, Josh Jacobs might have been the closest one, but I mean, he's not in Vegas anymore. Saquon Barkley was lackluster, but he's not in New York anymore. When it comes to Brandon Ayuk, I think he's had maybe one, maybe two decent seasons in the NFL. He's a talented wide receiver. He's doing something I would never be able to do. And if he ever watched this podcast, he'd probably call me some fat dude with a beard that has probably never, put on pads. And he'd criticize me for calling him out. But the fact of the matter is that he's not the best receiver on that team. He's not the second best receiver on that team. I think Christian McCaffrey's a better wide receiver than Brandon Ayuk is. And
they drafted a first rounder to try to replace him when they were thinking maybe they would have to trade him.
And did he not get hurt?
Disaster as well.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And especially if I'm a 49ers fan, I'm fed up with him. I'm like, I don't care where he goes. Just get him out of here. Because he's been nothing but a distraction. Christian McCaffrey's I think he's pushing 30, if not 30 now. George Kittle's getting up there in age. So the shelf we talked about 2 years ago when the Eagles lost in the Super Bowl, you said their window was closed. That was it. The window is very quickly closing for the San Francisco 49ers. Aaron Donald is no longer there.
Probably have one more season. I think they have a run at it.
I think one or two max.
Maybe two. It's probably close to one.
The only saving grace they have is the fact that the Rams are in the same boat because Matthew Stafford has not got much more time. I don't believe in Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, but they could sort of, start to improve as the 49ers decline. And we don't know what the Seahawks are going to look like because they sort of were up and down last year. So the only reason that I give them 2 more years is because I don't know what the rest of that division is going to look like in 2 years. I think they're coached well. I think they have enough talent, but with an aging Christian McCaffrey, honestly, an aging George Kittle, missing. I don't know why I said Aaron Donald.
You're getting them to the playoffs in the division. How long are they going to beat Detroit this year?
I don't think they will.
Right.
As long as Detroit
the window
stays healthy,
is closing. It's very, very narrow.
Yeah, it's very
if they don't beat Detroit this year, they're not beating them next year.
No,
and then you've got other teams that are going to stand up. I mean, how good is Green Bay going to be as Jordan Love continues to improve, assuming he does?
That's another.
The window closes very quickly, and this Brandon Ayuk thing, you either want to win a Super Bowl, you want to get the bag, and so many of these wide receivers, they want the bag. That's all they care about.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. Like we both agreed, the window is closing. Bill says 1 year. I say 1-2 max. That window to be a Super Bowl contender. Because you do have teams that are getting better. You don't know. Again, Detroit continues to get better. Most of their offensive guys are signed long-term, at least for the next 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. You're going to be looking at some of those defensive players that are going to be needing contracts like Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, some of those cornerbacks that they drafted this year. If they come out and that are studs in 4 or 5 years' time, they're going to need extensions. But they've still got them on rookie contracts that they're going to be good enough to be able to compete. Again, we both agreed that if they beat in San Francisco last year in the NFC Championship game,
yes,
we think they would have won the Super Bowl.
Yes.
So,
but then you've still got to beat Mahomes. You've still got to beat Mahomes. And if somebody beats Mahomes, if it's Burrow, if it's Josh Allen, if it's Tua, if it's Aaron Rodgers, I mean, who knows? That the Jets have a great defense. If Aaron Rodgers is at 80% of what he used to be, they might have a pretty darn good team. Yeah. You've still got to beat that team, and San Francisco hasn't done that yet. They haven't done it yet. Every time they've gotten there, they've gotten beat by that AFC team. And it's been 2 times in the last 4 years. So,
two of the last 3 years. 3 years. The 49ers have lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
I mean, that window closes. When you lose Debo, when you lose Kittle, when you lose McCaffrey, Your offensive weapons are gone. What is Brock Purdy going to do with the second team? We've already seen him try to do it. So,
It'll be interesting to see. I'm with you though. Like poor Shannon is not liking Shannon Smith is not liking what we have to say about it. But it's just
bang
facts
bang
are
Niner
facts.
gang. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I don't even like that.
Last bit of NFL to talk about before we close the show. Surprise teams for the 2024 season. We had some really good teams last year. We had some really bad teams last year.
I nailed one
last year.
I nailed one last year. I said the Green Bay Packers. That was my surprise team. I nailed that.
I didn't think the Lions were a surprise team, but I've been heavy on the Lions. Even as a fan, when Dan Campbell got hired, I knew that something was going to be happening. And slowly but surely, they've done nothing but prove me right.
No, I'm kidding.
So,
honestly, you can't pick the Lions now because if the only way they could surprise is to be bad. We're expecting a lot of I think really nice things out of the Lions. They've reloaded and the team is very similar, and their good players were very young, and so they're going to continue to get better. In my opinion.
How about this, Bill? How about this? Give me a surprise good team and a surprise bad team for this season.
I have two surprise good teams.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. So it's not a good – okay. I think it's going to be a pretty decent team. I think the Atlanta Falcons – I was telling you about that before. I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to be a surprise good team only because Kirk Cousins makes them so much better, and they were not terrible last year. Okay, so I think that they end up being a pretty good team. I do think Kyle Pitts does some stuff this year. We'll see what happens. Obviously different. I think the other team that's going to be a little surprising, and I'm not saying that they are going to light the world on fire, but I do think that they're going to be in a running for a playoff because their division is so stinky, is the Washington Commanders. I really like Jaden Daniels. I think he is the real deal at quarterback. I think he's going to be really good. They have Brian Robinson at running back. They have Terry McLaurin at wide receiver. McLaurin's always good and always was still a 1,000-yard receiver with the crappy quarterbacks they were rolling out for him to get thrown to. And I feel like that defense is not terrible. Even when they traded away all their pass rushers last year, that made no sense, but they still weren't terrible. I think that's going to be a little bit of a surprising team, and I really like Dan Quinn as their hire. That's a really neat hire. I think Dan Quinn's a really good coach, and I think it's going to be fun to watch that team play. So anyway, those are my two good teams. My bad team, Buffalo Bills.
Ooh, I love you saying that. Why do you think they're going to be bad?
I think the Buffalo Bills are in trouble. I think they're in trouble. I think their window is closed for sure. They lost. If you go look and see what they lost versus what they signed, you're talking about Diggs, Jordan Poyer. There's a laundry list of players that they've lost. They signed Keon Coleman. That was their one big get this year, and I couldn't tell you what Keon Coleman did last year. I think they're in trouble. Josh Allen was now granted. Josh Allen was much younger, but he was a different quarterback. He was not a good quarterback before Stephon Diggs got to that offense. And they acted like they didn't need Stephon Diggs anymore. So we'll find out this season. Miami looks like they're just as good as they were last year, and they were in it with Buffalo, obviously, in the games that they played. And I think that the Jets, obviously, with that defense in New York is scary. If Aaron Rodgers can stay, if Voldemort can stay, what do you call him? I don't know.
Voldemort, yeah.
Voldemort, if he can stay healthy, that's a good team. So I think the Bills are in trouble. I think the Bills, it's going to be a very well-contested division. And I think they could be surprisingly, and I'm not going to say bad, but 500, a little bit above 500, that's possible for the Bills this year.
It's funny you said 500 because a sneak preview for next week's show, I've been doing wins and losses for every team in the NFL. I've got the Bills with 10 wins this year.
Ooh.
So that's right close to
10-7. Yeah.
Right close to where you said 500. So not necessarily bad, but not that top tier one seed looking for the AFC for the Bills. I'll give you my surprising good team, and it's a relative term. My surprise good team this year is going to be the Carolina Panthers.
No.
Dave Canales. Listen, I'll give you another preview here, a sneak peek here. I've got the Panthers at 8-9. That is a vast improvement over last year's team. They made plenty of mistakes in the offseason. They have the worst owner in sports. But I think despite all their downfalls, Dave Canales was the right hire. He was able to resurrect the careers of both Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. He got Baker Mayfield his only ever contract extension in the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have not played their starters in the preseason. But from what I've heard from beat writers and people watching camp and watching practices, they had their joint practices with the New York Jets last week. Apparently, those defensive backs were giving Aaron Rodgers a tough time, where he was visibly irritated going back into the Jets huddles. There have been wide receivers like Terrace Marshall and Jonathan Mingo that have been getting open, which is something that they have never been able to do. Terrace Marshall specifically. And Bryce Young apparently has looked much improved over the dumpster fire that was 2023-24 season. And so I think they're going to surprise some teams in the fact that they're not going to be as bad as they were from a record standpoint last year. I think the offense is going to be much improved. The defense is not going to see that far of a drop off. So my surprise good team is the Carolina Panthers. My surprise bad team, we've talked about it a few times, it's going to be the Houston Texans. And I don't mean that they're going to be bad, but I think they sort of like the South Carolina Gamecocks and Shane Beamer year one, Houston overachieved last season. I think that people are going to see the tape on CJ Stroud. The Texans are going to come back down to earth. I think that Jacksonville is going to be improved. As much as I hate to say it, because we poo-pooed on Anthony Richardson all last offseason heading into the regular season, we at least I still hold the belief that Richardson will not be the starting quarterback in 4 or 5 years' time in Indianapolis. And I think it's going to be one of the biggest mistakes that Colts made. He was on fire for the 2 games that he played last year. I think the Colts are going to be a decent team this year. I think the Jags are going to be a decent team this year. And having said that, that means that the Texans are going to take a step back, because I believe they were a 10-win playoff team last year. I could see them sticking around that, or maybe going 9-8. But there are a lot of people, when I say surprise bad team, there are a lot of people that have them in the playoff picture, a lot of people that have them in the top 10 of their NFL power rankings. So when I say that I think they're going to be a surprise bad team, I think they're not going to live up to that hype, which means that they're going to be a surprise bad team for a lot of people. Bill, what do you say about those?
I think that's wild. I think both of those are wild picks. I disagree with Carolina. I don't think I can feel Carolina just yet. I have to see them play at least one game. I don't watch preseason. I haven't watched preseason. I've been so busy, you know that, with the move and all that stuff. It just happened. So obviously empty room. But I haven't really watched much, so I can't feel Carolina at 8, man. That's tough. I'm just going to go with that. You already made your argument. You don't have to debate it. I'm just saying that
I wasn't going to debate it. I was going to touch on preseason football, because I just recorded an episode of the Cat Cave tonight. First episode back. If you haven't gone, go out and watch it tomorrow when it releases on the Fans First Sports Network, the Cat Cave over on Spotify and the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. But I had the same conversation with Shannon that the Rob Brown of the Rob Brown Show said that preseason football is for the diehards. And although I consider myself a diehard, I've just had too much stuff going on to pay attention to college or to preseason football.
That's what's happening this season.
Yeah. So it is what it is, man.
I'm a diehard. I usually watch all of the Miami preseason games. I don't care if the starters don't play. I want to watch the backups. I want to see how I feel about the backup players, the guys that make the practice squad, whether or not I'm excited about them for next year. I want to see that. But this year, it's just been too much. Just too much going on. But yeah, I think them winning 8, that's a little crazy. And that is a bold pick for the Houston Texans. Go
big or go home.
And I'm going to do experts that say that they're going to be a great team this year, that they are going to be an AFC title contender, which makes them obviously a Super Bowl contender in CJ Stroud's second season. And you saying, pump the brakes, that's not happening. That's awesome. That's a cool pick. I like that. And I hope it's true.
I've only predicted 3 of their games.
AFC, so.
I've only predicted the 3 of their games. I've got them beating Chicago in week 2, losing to Buffalo in week 5, and losing to Baltimore in week 17. That's
Fair.
The only thing I've got to Houston. So
Caleb Williams is going to be a flop. Can't wait.
I cannot wait. I'm so glad you said that. Speaking of which, we've reached the end of the show. We've gone a few minutes over tonight, but overtime is jam-packed because we have a lot of stuff coming to you next week. We have not been with you, the audience, for a couple of months now. So now that we're back, there are a lot of things happening. Next week, I've already showed you, we will have a complete breakdown, division by division, NFL predictions for you to go into the regular season with. We will also going to be talking fantasy football prep and fantasy football draft strategies next week on the show. We're also going to have the return of Podcast Pick'em. Last year, Bill won Podcast Pick'ems with a record of 62-38 to my 54-46. So I am going to try to redeem myself. Bill, we need to talk off the air because I think we need to have a friendly bet with the Podcast Pick'em.
Factor crap.
We can do it with both. But we are gonna bring back Factor Crap when fantasy football comes around because that was a lot of fun. But the return of Podcast Pick'ems next week with week 1 of college football. All of this and more will be taking place on next week's show. A lot of really fun stuff to get into. You don't want to miss next week's show. We are back in the swing of things, back on Wednesdays. I have open mic comedy on Mondays and most Thursdays. So Wednesdays are sort of open, some Tuesdays, but now with the Cat Cave, I'll be recording most Tuesday nights. You may still see us here, and maybe sometimes Bill and I record on a Tuesday. It'll still go out Wednesday, one way or the other. We are going to be back every week with one exception in November to talk all things football with you going forward. Bill, before we sign off, is there anything else you want to close out the show with?
No, just excited to be back. Excited to talk football. Looking forward to the seasons. I wore my Gator stuff because I think they're going to need the most help this season. But Steve Spurrier came out today and predicted 8 or 9 wins. Let's go.
Yeah, good old ball coach. I mean,
the head ball coach. I'm
going to call him the good old ball coach because he quit on South Carolina in his final year because he knew he didn't have a team that was good enough to beat the Citadel. So he took a walk. And so thankful for what he did, but he can keep on walking. Thanks to everybody who joined the show, whether it was YouTube or Facebook. I'm going to try to work out X next week. If we can't go live on X, maybe we go back on Instagram. For the time being, you can always find the show, facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns. If you haven't already, follow that page. Invite your friends to follow that page. I believe we are pushing 1,000 followers on Facebook. I would love to hit that this season.
Yeah,
so let's get out there and share the page with your friends. Get them to follow the podcast over on Facebook. On X, at Tapouts and TDs. X
909, Ryan. 909. Yeah.
So we need 81 more. 80. No, Jesus, I'm terrible.
Math is hard. 91
more, and we'll reach 1,000 followers on Facebook. Over on X, at Tapouts and TDs, we have far fewer followers over on X. We have 74 followers on X. I believe X is sort of starting to fall by the wayside. There's a new app there called Threads that is basically Instagram's version of Twitter or X. But it's basically just a bunch of people trying to get engagement. Make sure if you haven't already, Boom Broadcasting in the house. Michael Davis and his new broadcasting network, Boom Broadcasting. Make sure you go out and support Boom Broadcasting. Go follow them on YouTube. They have a lot of really fun stuff coming. Out of Pocket, Drop the Mic. Lots of fun content coming over on Boom Broadcasting. Make sure you go and follow him, being Michael Davis as well. But yeah, on X, at Tapouts and TDs, and the YouTube, at Tapouts and Touchdowns. You can find us there as well. And then if you want to find me on Instagram, I'm at Ryan W. Frick. I post all my information regarding my stand-up comedy competitions and open mics and stuff there. I said I was going to plug it at the end of the show. Might as well since I'm here. 1800 Drayton in Spartanburg, South Carolina. They do these awesome comedy, stand-up comedy competitions. It will be next Friday, August 30th. Doors open at 7 p.m. Comics will start on stage at 8 p.m. Every comic will get 7 minutes. The judges will give their feelings about the comedians. And once they get through all the comedians, they will have a crowd vote and a judge vote. But listen, there's not a lot of talk about stand-up comedy down here in the South. You hear about places like Austin, Texas, and New York City and Los Angeles and stuff like that. We want to continue to grow the comedic scene here in the Carolinas. So even if you don't make it to the show next Friday, go to see an open mic show, whether it's at Coffee Underground downtown Greenville or Two Gyms Coal Yard in Spartanburg on Monday nights. You've got, I believe it's called Habas or Habibas here in Greenville that does open mics on Tuesdays. Go and support your local comedians because we have a lot of funny people here, and we want to continue to help grow the comedy scene here in the Carolinas. So make sure you can follow me on Instagram at Ryan W. Frick, and you'll see a bunch of stuff coming there. Listen, thank you again for everybody who was a part of the show, everybody that commented in, everybody who watched live with us. Stay tuned next week because we have another jam-packed show. We are glad to be back here on Tap House and Touchdown. So for Banker Bill, it's your guy, Bully Rye, and we will see you next week right here inside the Cat Cave.